Okay. At least starting out, for my sake, and hopefully for your good as well, I'd like to discuss separately the how and the why of Todd Phillips' Joker. How the filmmakers accomplished what they did, and then ultimately what it was they were actually trying to accomplish. Because, again, initially anyways, I don't want the discussion of either to muddy the other. And again, initially. Eventually we'll bring them together and discuss what exactly their combination did lead to with this film. So, starting out with the how did the filmmakers accomplish what they did? Well, quite simply, they masterfully, uniquely, and powerfully harnessed all of these cinematic tools at their disposal. Tools that they wielded profoundly to affect me in a very deep way. Looking first at the screenplay, Todd Phillips and co-writer Scott Silver really did do an outstanding job constructing the journey of Arthur Fleck. This slow, deliberate, so often excruciating descent into the blackness of isolation, despair, and rage. In a lot of ways, I think the structure of this movie was the one that so many were hoping for with the Star Wars prequels, specifically with the transformation of Anakin Skywalker into Darth Vader. Because unlike those films, this one started with a main character whose innocence and youth had long ago been stripped from him. A character who was already at the brink of the abyss. And because of that, the screenwriters really did have a lot of latitude to, in very realistic ways and in very small ways, just nudge this character towards that monstrous place that he ended up by the end of the film, which led to an arc that was all the more believable and consequently all the more devastating to us, the viewer. Something else that these screenwriters did exceedingly well was actually present this film through the eyes and ears of a very unreliable narrator. It was genuinely thrilling to watch the writers, in certain instances, pull back that curtain and reveal that Arthur had been unreliable, and then, in other moments, withhold that information and just leave us sitting there wondering, was that real or not? And because of that, this entire film really was this extremely unnerving, often disturbing presentation of what it might feel like to lose your mind, not knowing what's real and what's not, what's actually there and what isn't. But it wasn't just what was on the page that was so effective, but the way that Phillips chose to shoot it, edit it, and score it. All of those cinematic elements were so critical in illuminating the inner workings of Arthur's mind. The director's constant use of an extremely shallow depth of field, for example. Depth of field being how much is out of focus in front of the subject and how much is out of focus behind the subject. But the fact that it was so very shallow on this film meant that the lead character constantly felt isolated, unable to connect to any kind of genuine love or affection. And man, did the score from Hildur Guðnadóttir, and yes, I think that's the right pronunciation for the Icelandic name. Nonetheless, the score worked perfectly. It just droned and ground on and on, really filling me with this palpable sense of dread and despair. And finally, we come to the element that everyone seems to be talking about, and rightfully so, and that is Joaquin Phoenix as the Joker. Not that the two need to be compared really at all, but in an interesting way, I do feel like Joaquin Phoenix's Joker is sort of the antithesis of Heath Ledger's Joker. In watching The Dark Knight, never once did I feel like I was seeing Heath Ledger, just his creation. In contrast, when I was watching Joker, I felt like I was always seeing Joaquin Phoenix. I felt like he'd ripped out his own soul and was just holding it out there for all of us to see. And as such, his performance was always just engaging, transportive, and moving. Okay, now that we've discussed a lot of the how the filmmakers and actors went about crafting Joker, let's talk about the what. What exactly were they trying to do or say with this film, and maybe more importantly, should it have been said or done? Well, having read a number of interviews and reviews on this film, I could imagine that the filmmakers intended, and a lot of the viewers interpreted, that the film was about this. It was about the exploration of evil, how it's created, where it springs from, and how we should respond to it. And those that look at Joker that way may well find themselves comparing this film to something like Taxi Driver or Breaking Bad. In all three of those stories, we do indeed watch a character descend into darkness. Even while some of their falls are great and some of them are small, they all do endure a fall. Additionally, like those two stories, we the audience are asked, even if just for a time, to relate to and identify with, and sometimes even root for, that individual and that descent. And that story alone is already difficult enough to craft and to assess, because if it's not crafted carefully or responded to appropriately, the filmmakers may inadvertently present someone or something that's not only evil, but also attractive. Now, don't get me wrong. Evil is indeed attractive. It's alluring, and there should be, as we discuss it and talk about it and present in a way that it does have some kind of gravitational pull. But, not at the expense of the rest of the truth. That truth being it's also horrid, gross, and repulsive. So, for example, we all do in our hearts feel that murder is wrong. Why then, when that murder is someone putting a pencil through someone's skull, why does it suddenly become not only laughable, but also cool? And those same treacherous waters are present in this film, as it's filled with tons of moments that, whether the filmmakers intended them or not, could easily be a glorification of the very thing that ought to be seen as horrendous. And if that was the only thing that this film had to wrestle with, it would still warrant much thought and vigilance while it was being viewed. But that's not all that's going on here. Not all by a long shot. So even while the character of Travis Bickle from Taxi Driver and Arthur Fleck from Joker do have similar arcs, ones that see those characters descending quite literally into madness that leads to horrifying violence, they remain qualitatively different. Why? Because we, the viewing audience, already know who Joker is. He's this comic book character who, for the last 60 years, has been presented as this crazed, maniacal clown who fights a man dressed up in a batsuit. And in that time, we've generally presented him as this fictional villain, which places him in a completely different category than Travis Bickle. We're allowed to root for his defeat and continued existence because he's been created to be this perfect foil for one of our favorite caped vigilantes. And ultimately, in Joker, it was into that same character that Arthur Fleck ultimately transformed by the end of the film. A character who dressed up like a clown, called himself the Joker, and indeed existed in the very same universe as an orphaned boy who would one day turn into his arch nemesis. Even though he's not that for 90% of this film. For most of this film's runtime, he was crafted to be this very real man with very real psychological problems, intentionally designed to look and to feel grounded and realistic and tragic, designed to feel a part of our world. And so, what were the filmmakers saying, intentionally or not, when that individual with those real-life problems transformed into a comic book character? Honestly, I'm still not sure, but I do know that it's important that we together discuss and analyze what it is that this film is doing and what it is it was saying and what it's getting us to believe and to think. And I do know that we should be disturbed when we hear an actual cheer go up, when this character that we've watched just drug through hell this entire film, march at his door. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. If you guys haven't seen this film, I'm going to have a few spoilers right now. Nothing major, but spoilers nonetheless. So I would advise you probably click away and then come back because, again, I really do want to discuss this with you. But again, I think we should be disturbed when we watch this film and we hear in a theater a cheer go up when this character, dressed in his full getup, with the clown makeup and his outfit, march at his door to go and commit suicide. What? That is not the response that we should have in that moment. Furthermore, I personally found myself towards the film's ending when this character found himself standing in a car surrounded by cheery masses dressed in these clown masks. I found myself actually tearing up in that moment because it was so tragic that this character had finally found the acceptance and love, but not really. A destructive, horrible kind of acceptance and love. And my greatest concern is that we, the viewing audience, are just those screaming masses, cheering for something that we don't fully understand and haven't taken the time to assess properly. And for all these reasons, I'm actually going to do something I've never done, which is actually not give a rating to this film. Please don't misconstrue this as me saying that this film receives a 0 out of 5. Not at all. I just think that there are far more important things to think about than just what rating I, as a critic, have given to this film. So please take the time to discuss below, discuss with each other, and think very carefully about what this film is saying and what it's doing. Again, whether the people behind it intended it or not. Finally, please do subscribe. I'm going to continue to review films and television on this channel, and I would love for you to stay up to date on all of those things. But for now, I'm Chris Hartwell. This is The Heartbeat. Thank you for joining me.